Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, August 13th regular City Council meeting. With that, D. Stiles Elliott, will you please call roll?
Mayor Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember DeLira.
Here.
Councilmember Fajarin.
Here.
Councilmember Gaither.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller.
Present.
Councilmember Wright.
Here.
So good evening, and if the announcements are any indication, we are back to a lot of activities, and so let me get working on the announcements. First of all, National Lentil Festival is this weekend. The festival starts Friday with Downtown Vibes starting at 4 p.m. On Kamaikan Street and off of Kamaikan Street, the parking lot. And the 2024 Walk of Fame inductees, including our former mayor, Glenn Johnson, at the Pullman Heritage Depot Center at 6 o'clock. Saturday's festivities include the Tasty Lentil 5K Fun Run at 7:30, sports tournament starting at 10 o'clock, the Grand Parade at 11 a.m., and the festival beginning at noon in Rainey Park, which also includes free chili from 3 to 5. For full schedule events, visit lentilfest.com. For Pullman, we would like to welcome WSU students back. First day of classes is Monday, August 19th. And in preparation for students, not only WSU students, but also our K through 12, the Crestview Path Project is almost done. The stretch of Crestview between Grand and City Hall will reopen next week. So it'll be easy to get back to City Hall. And the Military Hill Project is also almost all done. Roads are expected to open up back by Friday of this week for getting up to the high school. And then we have another project that's starting. The Terraview Path Project will start on Monday, August 19th, with an anticipated completion date of October 14th. Traffic disruption is expected to be minimal during the construction, with Terraview open or partially open for most of the project. On to the downtown project this Thursday. Just so you know, there's some changes in traffic. So this Thursday, August 15th, Main Street and Paradise traffic will be detoured to Spring Street and Daniel Street beginning at 5 a.m. For the work to be done between Paradise and Spring, and traffic should be back to the current configuration by the end of the day. We also on Thursday have the Pullman Moscow Regional Airports holding their grand opening for the new airport terminal. And so that would be Thursday, August 15th at 11 a.m. All are welcome. Also on Thursday, as I said, it's a busy week. Pullman is celebrating City Hall Selfie Day. Anyone can get involved to participate. Take a picture of yourself with a group or with a community member in front of your favorite local government building. There's a lot of them around town, and I expect to see different council members getting involved with this. Then post it on your favorite social media platform with the hashtag #CityHallSelfie and make sure to tag the City of Pullman. Also, Transit, exciting for Pullman Transit, changes for summer schedule to full service on Monday, August 19th, and this includes a return of the midnight service for the first time since 2019. So it's nice to be back, getting back to those schedules. Parks and Recreation is seeking input from the public for the upcoming Parks and Recreation and Open Space, the PROS plan. Attend the public event this Thursday. A lot going on Thursday, August 15th at 6:30 here in City Council chambers to learn about the master planning process and give input on Parks and Recreation in Pullman. And we're down to the last concert in the park of the season is tomorrow at Rainey Park. Modern country band Midnight Highway will be closing for the season. And for those that still haven't found something to do on Thursday, at 6:30, the Neal Public Library is hosting best-selling authors Bethany Bennett, Jamie Davenport, Jewel Allen, and Lauren Smith to talk about the romance genre and what makes readers love romance so much. And it's called What's Love Got to Do with It? It's a romance authors panel. So if you can't find something to do in Pullman this week, you're not trying hard enough, that's for sure. So with that, it's exciting to see all these things happening in Pullman. Next up is community comments. This agenda item is the first of two opportunities during this meeting for public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials. Specifically, this item is reserved for public comments, concerns, or information not related to a previous public hearing or final action of the item. This agenda item for comments is not to exceed 30 minutes in total. With that, are there any community members that would like to provide public comment? If so, please come to the microphone and you'll have 2 minutes for each person. Go ahead.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Shay Davidson, and I've been a citizen of Pullman for the past 5 years. I'm here to encourage the City Council to keep pushing for a ceasefire resolution like you have been by having the listening session on Monday. I'm grateful for the City Council members who are listening to the community and who are willing to have these hard discussions. When I was younger and learning about atrocities that were committed around the globe, I often wondered how people stood by and allowed horrible things to happen. Unfortunately, I'm living through and watching an atrocity that is funded by our government, and I'm learning how people excuse themselves from their complicity in genocide. I've heard excuses of, I'm not educated enough to have an opinion, rather than taking the time to educate themselves and listen to the firsthand accounts of people suffering. I've heard that now is not the time or the place to talk about this issue, to push the issue away rather than working to make a time and space for the issue. I've heard people say you're being too demanding rather than seeing the reason why so many people are fighting for the ceasefire resolution. I've heard people say the issue is too divisive rather than standing against genocide and collective punishment and with the majority of Americans who do not want this genocide to continue. I've learned that people would rather bury their heads in the sand because genocide makes them uncomfortable rather than fighting to protect human rights and use our voices as citizens of the country funding the genocide to make the genocide end. Yet I've also met new and wonderful people because of this. I've gotten involved in local politics for the first time because I feel so strongly that no person should be murdered for the color of their skin, where they live, or their religious values. Tragedies, while also have the ability to bring communities together and strengthen the bonds within community. So I hope that the Pullman City Council can use their power to uplift the voices of our community and strengthen our trust in each other rather than sweeping issues under the rug and turning our backs on each other because it isn't our issue to solve. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to provide public comment? Please.
Hello, my name is Matthew Strupp. I'm a Pullman resident. What's that?
Please go ahead.
I'm a Pullman resident, a member of the Palouse Democratic Socialists of America, and an activist with Pullman for Palestine. I'm speaking, just like Shay, to reiterate the demand from the community for the City Council to pass a resolution calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire and an end to occupation and apartheid in Palestine. The events of the past few weeks have further clarified the character of the war in Gaza as a genocidal colonial one waged on the Palestinian people by the State of Israel with no impunity and no end in sight. In the first place, we saw Israel release without charges the 6 soldiers who had been arrested for the brutal rape of a Palestinian prisoner, which the perpetrators have described proudly in Israeli media after armed gangs of settlers and masked soldiers, supported by Knesset members from the ruling Likud party, descended on a military base where the soldiers were being held. This proves that Israel's own legal system is incapable of holding its armed agents responsible for the war crimes they commit against Palestinians, and that the routine abuse of the thousands of Palestinian prisoners who are denied trial in civilian court and are therefore hostages cannot be punished in the case of even an extraordinarily heinous and well-publicized incident. In addition, Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, the political head of Hamas, while he was in Iran, both provoking a potential wider regional war and showing their disinterest in peace negotiations, since the man they assassinated was supposed to be one of the main parties with whom they were negotiating. We know that whoever the U.S. president is, whether it's Donald Trump, Genocide Joe, or Killer Kamala, they won't end American support for this genocide in the form of billions of dollars in arms to Israel unless they are pressured to do so by the American people. So that's why it's so important for a city like Pullman to join the choir of over 100 local governments in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire in Palestine. Please embrace the tradition of solidarity in municipal government, proclaim loudly Pullman's character as a welcoming and equal community, and pass a ceasefire resolution.
Thank you for comments. Is there anyone else?
Dear council members, my name is Ali and I am a working professional in Pullman. I would like to show you a small interview of Aviva. She's a hostage held in Gaza. So I just want to play a 20-second clip from this interview.
7 times. I've met Biden. I've met Blinken at least 7 times. And I'm begging. I'm begging. I think this war, for me, is so cruel. To think that he is still there, lying on a mattress, just like a rat.
Okay, so you heard the family of a hostage. So this interview aired on ABC News a week ago. And then this is a girl, a Palestinian girl, and she has a horrible illness on her face, and she's not able to cure that because medicines cannot reach her. You all could see the horrible illness on her face. So my point here is that the instrument on your table is the tool to minimize suffering on both sides. This girl, if you look into her eyes, she has the rights to see her future. And the wife of that hostage also has the right to be with her husband. And I think that, in my opinion, a ceasefire is the best way to move forward in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to provide comment? With that, on to city council member comments, and I'll start with Councilmember Fajarin.
I just want to express my sincere thank you to first the Boys and Girls Club of the Lewis Clark Valley for partnering with Pullman Schools to continue after-school programming that is so essential to our families and children. Even more so, I also want to extend my deepest gratitude to the residents and businesses who generously donated to make this possible. You really do embody the very best in Pullman, and thanks to your contributions, the child care gap in our community will not grow larger. The community can view the list of individuals and businesses who made this happen on this recent press release on Pullman Radio News. So I just wanted to extend my sincere thank you to those individuals and businesses, as well as the Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you. Councilmember Parks?
No comments.
Councilmember Wright?
No comment.
Councilmember Guido?
No comment.
Councilmember Weller?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what, my fellow council member said about the Boys and Girls Club. I'd also like to, and I'm sure Mackenzie's watching, she was very instrumental in that, along with a lot of different people. So Mackenzie Brummett, thank you so much, and everybody else involved. Would also like to express, if you haven't had a chance to go and see McGee Park, it is absolutely phenomenal. The paving is done, the cracked sidewalks are done. It's being used very widely by a lot of kids and their families. Now some college students, so that's still good, that's good. And the equipment is just phenomenal as well. So if you have a chance, check McGee Park out.
Councilmember DeLira?
Yeah, so I want to provide details around an upcoming event. As a follow-up to the conversations that were started in regards to the ceasefire resolution in Pullman. Eric Fajarin and I will be holding a ceasefire resolution listening session on August 19th from 5:15 p.m. to 6:45 p.m. at Neal Public Library. This session invites the Pullman community to share input on a proposal for a resolution that calls for a ceasefire in Israel and Gaza. The listening session will be facilitated by Eric Wegner, a martial arts instructor of Aikido, the Way of Harmony, and has training in mediation and facilitation in the University of Idaho Law School. This will be a chance for people to share their different viewpoints in a respectful environment, and we will go over guidelines at the start of the session. You can register to speak at the event by going to tinyurl.com/AUG19CR. There will be a limited time available to sign up in person at the day of the event. There is a Facebook event titled Ceasefire Resolution Listening Session where you can find the web link as well. You will not find information on this on the city website or social media, which is a perfect transition for me to say that this is not an official Pullman City Council or City of Pullman event. And to finish off this announcement, I want to emphasize this last point. So we hope that a wide range of all viewpoints come to speak and listen to each other. I believe we can create a space where different perspectives are heard and where we can still recognize each other's humanity. I know very well how scary it can be to come forth with your viewpoint where no one else holds your viewpoint, but I also recognize how important it is to share ideas. So I encourage you to come and speak and or listen to your neighbors here in Pullman, and we will approach this session with open minds, empathy, and willingness to be vulnerable. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or Eric Vigerin. Thank you.
Councilmember Gaither?
No comment.
And for me, I really want to echo again, as Councilmember Fajarin and Willer said, we're very excited for the Boys and Girls Club coming in and picking up that needed area as it relates to after-school child care. With that, on to committees, commissions, and boards report. And with us today, we have Larry, you're hiding in the back. There we go. Larry Clark, who is the chair of the Environmental Resilience Commission, to provide the City Council an update. With that, Larry, welcome.
Thank you very much. Do I use the mouse to proceed on the slides? Okay. Well, thank you for having me here today. And for my presentation from the Environmental Resilience Commission, I'd like to spend about 10 minutes going over what we've been working on and some of our objectives for this year, and then open it up to questions from the City Council members. First of all, to preface my presentation, I want to thank the Commission, or the City Council, for putting together this commission at a very important time in our history. You know, we're facing climate change, a lot of environmental change, and it's important for our local government to be involved with this. The City of Pullman has already been engaged in a lot of work, and we appreciate that, and I think this commission has some really good ideas that we'll be bringing forward to the City Council in the upcoming months about how we can continue this important work. First of all, briefly, the commission was put together by the City Council in 2022, and it's to develop and recommend innovative and collaborative actions for the city and community to mitigate climate change contributions and build equity, resiliency, and sustainability. All of the commissioners, myself included, take this to heart. We really believe strongly in this. We have an excellent group of commissioners. And speaking of those members, I'm on the commission. Lauren Kirkpatrick is our commission vice chair. Commission secretary is a high school student who graduated actually in June, Tianyi Chen. I'll talk a little bit in future slides about the commission members and what we're looking forward to. And then we have Asdrin Coma, Stephen Johnson, and Charles Ugwu. We have an excellent group of people who are deeply committed to this cause. So briefly, our year in review. One of the first things we had on our plate, and I know this council has seen this, was the capital plan for the city, and it was very comprehensive, and so we were handed a whole bunch of different areas on there to look at and to bring some recommendations. And I think it was just a few months ago that I came here and talked a little bit about some of the areas where we offered improvements. What we thought of as improvements for the capital plan. That took up a lot of our time. We actually found it very informative. We learned a lot about where the City of Pullman was going and where the City of Pullman was planning to address some of these issues around environmental resilience. We also assessed Pullman's recent and current initiatives on environmental stewardship, climate change mitigation, and planning for resilience. And I want to thank city staff for putting together quite an impressive list of some of the areas that Pullman is already working toward. Things like electric buses and getting more scooters and e-bikes and other transportation methods, as well as looking at how we can make our waterways a little more resilient with native plants and looking at tree cover and things like that. We also established our goals for 2024, and I'll be spending the bulk of my time looking at those for you. And then we divided leadership responsibility for those 2024 goals among the commissioners. So each of us took a couple of different goals and are shepherding those forward. Those goals broadly are to be a resource and collaborate with the city officials and staff on these climate actions and environmental sustainability initiatives, to really prioritize resilience, equity, environmental justice, and transform the city toward a more sustainable community. Engage and collaborate and educate the entire community to gather input, and then promote that action. Identify and implement metrics to measure the effectiveness of our environmental actions. This is very important for me personally and for all the other commissioners to really show that we're making progress. To gather input with different forms of data, surveys, that kind of thing from community members, organizations, and stakeholders, and then collaborate with other community organizations. So when we get down to the brass tacks here, we looked at a number of objectives and put those together to see how we can move the city forward. And the top of the list for all of us was really developing a climate action plan. This has been done in a lot of cities all over the country, all over Washington State. And so we have some really good ideas about what pieces we would want in a climate action plan. And so we've been assessing those different climate action plans from cities across the state, really looking at which ones might make sense for us and our community. And we're going to be putting that together and bringing it forward for the City Council for your consideration. This will include a number of different ideas of how we might move forward with things like conserving water or finding ways to put more native plants along our rivers. Things we've already started, but I think we can move forward with. And also transportation. It's a big piece for us. Then we are also looking at how to reach out to the community. And this is always, my business, my day job, as it were, is actually marketing and communication. And the world has changed even since I first started my work in terms of how do you reach people? How do you get them involved? How do you get their opinion? And so we're really looking at different ways we might do that. The city email newsletter is one way that we're working with the city staff on how we can get pieces in there, things that community members can do themselves, also actions that the city are doing, is involved with. But there are some opportunities here, I think, for reaching the community, including going to community events like the Lentil Festival and all these things that are happening this very week. The next thing that's on here is actually along that same line. And we've already done this. Asdrin Koma, who's involved with his graduate program in getting surveys out and getting information from people, has designed a survey. He's written a survey, and we've approved it. And it will solicit input from the city and from community members on generally, things that we can do and that they'd like us to work on for environmental resilience. But also specifically, what kind of issues might they have with transportation? What do they want to see the city do to really up our game when it comes to transportation and reducing the traffic flow? There are all kinds of things, as I'm sure every council member knows, that can be done to really improve transportation in the city. The other thing that we're working on is collaborating with the Pullman School District and the community to form and maintain communication through an environmental youth council. This is, again, something that's been done in a lot of different cities, a lot of different areas. We really want everybody in the community, not just adults, but everybody to be involved with this effort. It really does take a group effort to make a sustainable community. And I've found that some of the most devoted people who are interested in this are younger people. The high school has a great environmental club. Tianyi Chen, who's on our commission, she's really engaged. And so we want to take that a step further and have a core group at the high school who are engaged with us and helping us out, getting the word out, giving us ideas, and consulting on different issues. Tianyi Chen and I have spoken with Bob Maxwell, and he's very much in favor of this. He thinks this is a great idea, and so we're putting together a framework. We're just finishing up the draft of it, and so we hope this fall to start recruiting some high school students to be part of a youth council. This is something that we'll also be bringing forward to the city council for consideration in the next month or so. There was a lot of discussion about how this work gets done. Many other cities have a person on staff, on their city staff, who is engaged with environmental work. And so Stephen Johnson on our commission is looking into what those job descriptions might be, and he's going to bring forward some ideas for consideration of a permanent staff position in the city. We're also looking at some ethics around preserving green spaces, environmental features, and natural areas. And this is more of a guideline and a way of kind of considering how we treat our natural areas around the city. We want to identify and facilitate at least 2 grant proposals for the city this year to expand its resiliency to climate change. And there are a lot of grants out there, and I know that's actually one of the principles that the commission was put forward to work on is to really find some of those grants out there. And so we're going to work with city staff, identify things that would have the most impact for us, and hopefully put together those grants by the end of the year, or as close as we can to the end of the year. There are also a lot of local government organizations around environmental resilience, climate change mitigation, and adaptation. And we would like the city consider joining at least one of those organizations. They have a lot of helpful resources. We can lean on them for model ordinances, for example, that might help us out. And then maybe even open up some possible grants down the road. We want to participate in community events to bring awareness to ways for Pullman residents to get involved and to work themselves on some of these areas. And then develop a framework for planting and introducing native species to green spaces. I know a lot of this work is already in progress, and we see this as an important way to really build Pullman's natural environment. And it does an awful lot toward reducing the carbon output that we have if we have these kind of green spaces. And then finally, we want to meet annually with different organizations, including WSU's now revitalized Sustainability Environmental Committee and other organizations. We can really hopefully find some synergy there, find some ways that we can work together on different projects. WSU has an awfully big footprint in Pullman, and they have a lot of different ideas that I think we could probably engage with them on and really double our impact. A few future plans. Sorry, I'm just glancing at the clock. A few future plans, just briefly, is to find new members for the Environmental Resilience Commission. Tianyi Chen is heading off to Syracuse in New York. Congratulations to her. Going off to college, and so that opens one position on the commission, and I believe there's also another open position on the commission. And so I would ask the council to please consider really promoting this and soliciting some different people to start applying for these positions. Possibly also looking for somebody from the high school. It was really, really helpful having Tian Yu Chen on the commission. As a high schooler, she also served as our secretary and did an awesome job on that. Also, any ideas that you might have, or that we work on, effective means of communicating with Pullman citizens. We want people to really be involved with this. This is a group effort. And then stronger integration with those environmental and sustainability organizations. WSU, Moscow's Sustainable Environment Commission, PBAC. I think there are some different ways that we could find shared objectives and work together with them. So with that, I'd ask if there are any questions.
So any questions for Larry? Councilmember Weller.
Larry, thank you so much. And I think it's really important to make sure to recognize this is something, and I know the council has probably heard this and probably many department heads, but it bears repeating. How long this has really taken for us to get to this point. Back in about 2013, this is something that was discussed by myself and Derek Skog, who was on the council at that time. And it was very much in-house that things were being done. However, the challenge is you don't get public input, or you don't get that knowledge out to the public that things are going on. And so I really appreciated what you said about mentioning or having a newsletter, website, whatever it is, mentioning what the city is already doing, because we are doing quite a bit. I think also I have a couple just thoughts. As you know, and I'm sure the rest of the commissioners know, this is a multifaceted challenge that we face. And I know as I was going through my master's degree, looking at bioregional planning, looking at all of the different functions, not only of environmental and conservative efforts, but also, for instance, I'm just going to ask that you also look at certain things like solid waste. So, sitting on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and Palouse Basin Aquifer, we also have council members sitting on the Regional Transportation. So these are all important for it, but along with that is PCEI and the Phoenix Conservancy. So I appreciate what you were saying there. The one question I do have is, have you looked at models from other cities? I was just kind of perusing. Of course we have examples from Berkeley, border town in New Jersey, things like that, as far as how they have organized their environmental commissions. I know you have just done an amazing job and so much information already that you're doing, but I was just wondering if you have looked at other models from other cities.
We have, and we continue to look at them, and I think that you'll see some of those results as we forward a climate action plan. MSRC has a lot of really great information as well. I know it's Washington specific, but they do have some great examples from Bellingham and a number of other cities that I can't remember because I have them written down on a Google Doc. But there are some good examples of how we can steal their ideas, make them fit with Pullman and really move forward. So absolutely, thank you for that. Now, I haven't looked at Berkeley specifically, but I'll look that up now.
Councilmember Guido?
Hi, Larry.
Hi.
Thanks for that presentation and comment and a question. First of all, I want to thank you for your leadership in stepping up to this commission and playing a key role in our look at how we can play a role in climate change and how to respond to that and how to be resilient. And you're very thorough in terms of everything that you're looking at and ambitious. I'm looking forward to the reports that you're going to be providing us. And then just a suggestion rather than a question, that have you thought about reaching out to WSU's School of the Environment as a potential partner in some of what you're trying to do, or at least as a resource?
Oh, we haven't reached out to the School of the Environment. I did reach out to the Environmental Sustainable, I forget what it's called, their Sustainability Commission or Committee, but they have revitalized it and includes a couple of different members of the School of the Environment. I believe Kent Keller is on there, and then a couple of others. And so once I connect with them, I think it can also make the connection with the School of the Environment. That's an excellent suggestion. They have a lot of grad students in particular who I think would be very interested in helping us out.
Councilmember Parks?
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. That was a great report, and I'm really impressed with the work that you all have done in a relatively short time. So it's very encouraging. As far as a couple things that have come up since thinking about, I was doing research for another project that some of us are working on together. The city of Boulder in Colorado has a wonderful website strictly about community engagement. So I would recommend you take a look at that. And then as far as members, recruiting members, I would say we've heard a lot as a council over the last year about people concerned about environmental issues in our community. And so I'm putting out a public call for those members who made their voices heard to say that this would be a really good fit perhaps for them to get involved at a deeper level and affect possibly future policy as well. And then the only other thing I had was that WSU that Councilmember DeLira brought up. Also the, oh, I just lost it again. What's it called? The extension, WSU extension would be perhaps a good place for both collaboration and perhaps membership ideas for your board. So thank you so much.
Thank you for those suggestions. Those are really good. I'll make sure to mark those down.
Councilmember DeLira?
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. I appreciate the attention to transportation in your presentation. And I also think that the youth council idea is really awesome. So I'm excited to see that idea progress forward. It sounds like one of the ideas that the commission has is to have the city join a organization. And just out of curiosity, has there been any organizations that the ERC has in mind currently?
Yes, there is one in particular that has a large membership. And of course, as soon as you ask me that question, I forget the exact name of it. It's an acronym that is quite long. But it is an organization that includes a lot of different municipalities across the U.S. I believe they also have an international presence. And I will find that for you and forward it to the council to look at. But yes, there is one in particular that I think would be most helpful.
Councilmember Wright?
Thank you, Larry, for your presentation and the work that you've done on this. And I know, because I know you, and it's because of your leadership that this initiative has been brought to the position that it is right now. Your list of goals and objectives is very ambitious. And as we are here already in August of 2024, are you considering like moving those goals, bridging into 2025 to make it more of a realistic and attainable set of goals? Because I know you're going to make yourself crazy to do all of this by the end of December, right?
Thank you for that. And yes, as I was putting together this presentation and reviewing all the goals, I do think that there are some that will continue on into 2025. I think we'll make substantial progress on them, even through the end of the year. But the Climate Action Plan in particular, I think is a pretty hefty piece of work. And I don't know that we'll have that fully, fleshed out for the city council to look at before the end of the year. That one in particular. The others, I think splitting up the duties among the commissioners has really worked well, and they've made substantial progress on a lot of those different objectives. And so I could see, for example, like identifying grants that we might apply for. Definitely. The Youth Council framework, we're pretty close to having that ready to go, for review. So some of them, yes, I do think we'll accomplish by the end of the year. Others will move forward into 2025.
Great. Thank you. Just was hoping to make this more realistic for you in terms of attainment of those, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Right, and there's a number of things that are out of your control because you have city processes that you have to go through. Even before you can apply for grants, you have to have approval from the council to be able to apply for the grant. So there's a series of things in that way. With that, Councilmember Weller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One other thing, Larry. I know this was something when we were, the original group was forming the Environmental Commission, when we were talking about how do we bring this together, what are the original goals and everything. We were talking about tribal representation or working with. And I know Palouse Basin, that's what we do. And that was one of the original things that we were considering, very important for that group. So I'm not sure if that has come up in conversation, but I know when we were forming the Environmental Commission, that was something that was discussed. So just wanted to put that in.
It hasn't come up as one of the objectives, but I will add it to that objective that we have for connecting with different organizations. That's an excellent idea, and I really think we'd like to move forward with that. So thank you for that.
So thank you for your work, and I know, Nathan's talked about the formation of it, but we actually had an Environmental Quality Commission that was predated your environmental resilience that I was on 20 years ago. So things cycle, and it's good to see the energy that's going on. And we have been announcing about the open positions for the last couple months. We've also put it out in the newsletter, so we have put it out to the community, and we're still waiting on the applications. So, but we do want we know that a full slate makes it easier for the work to get done. For that. But thank you again for the work that you're doing and for the whole commission, for the people. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Appreciate
it. Next up is items for future agenda requests. Are there any council members that have a request for future agenda items? Seeing none, on to community comments on final action items. This agenda item is the second of two opportunities in the meeting for public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials. This is for agenda items the City Council will take final action on. Is there anyone who would like to provide community comments? Seeing none. Going on, we have three presentations tonight. The first one will be on the dwelling inspection program and life safety inspection with Jeremy Moore, our building official. With that, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'd like to take a few moments this evening to explain the city's dwelling inspection program. We consider these life safety inspections. See if I can get this to work. So this dwelling inspection program, it's free to the public. The requester must be listed on the lease, either the tenant or the owner or like the property manager or the owner's agent. And the reason for this protocol is usually for right of entry concerns. They need to be on that lease requesting us to come into their dwelling. And so that's an important part of it. The form is available upon request. We do this upon request electronically or in person, so city staff have the opportunity to properly vet their concerns to determine if the dwelling inspection is right for them. Many times people will call with mold or mildew or cleanliness complaints, and that's just not what this program is designed for. This is not intended for the WSU residence halls themselves. We try to refer those calls directly to the appropriate WSU housing staff. And again, this is very life safety oriented down to the checklist we use. And the building codes really focus in on the life safety. So those other mold, mildew, things like that, we try and direct them towards Department of Health with the county. And then this is the inspection request form. It's pretty simple. They have to clearly note if they're the owner, the agent, or the tenant, their location, and then they have an opportunity at the bottom there to list their specific concerns that they see in their apartment or their dwelling, whether it be bare wires or loose railings on a deck, things like that. They can specify all that right there. Once we receive the inspection request form, the building inspector, I say the building inspector, Inspector Alan Luke really does a great job managing this program for us. For consistency, we try and have one person do the majority of it. He gets a real relationship built up with the property managers in the area. And Mr. Alan Luke does an amazing job kind of managing this program for us. All the inspectors take part in it, but he's the main contact for these. After he receives the request, he'll contact that owner and property manager to inform them of the request and invite them to the inspection. And the reason why we do that is for transparency. The transparency of having the property manager and the owner through this process really yields good results. It also works to mitigate any miscommunications that may happen with the parties involved. We get everyone there on the same page, and we walk through the dwelling together. The goal for this process is compliance and getting results, and it's just the transparency is what really helps that. That way nobody's on the defensive. And then when we get done with the inspection, we have these additional resources that we can provide to that tenant or that requester. If they're a WSU student, we get them in contact or let them know that they have student legal services available on campus. That's a great advocate for the students. I talked a couple years ago, I talked with the person that headed this program up, and they said that they have resources available to actually read their lease and review their lease with them, even if before they sign it if they wish, so they know what they're getting into. And they'll also review the landlord-tenant law in the state of Washington and help them understand their rights as a tenant. So that's a pretty good resource. And then if they're not a student, we let them know that the Attorney General's website and the PDF of the landlord-tenant law itself is available on the city website. And they can get to that by the How Do I portion on our website, and then select the resident resources, and there's a list of pretty good resources there. Everything from this to where smoke detectors are required, things of that nature. So, and then this is what the inspector takes with them in the field. The first page here on your left, pretty similar to the request location, person who requested it. And then at the bottom, he can note if he saw code violations or specific items that he noted on his inspections. He can make his comments there. And what we use as a guiding document is the checklist you see on your right. That checklist, again, very life safety focused. Things on that such as address numbers, so EMS services can get to the right address in the event of an emergency. Decks and porches if they're in safe condition. Handrails, guardrails, smoke alarms, bedroom egress. Make sure they have hot water and a heating system in the building. Any unsafe wires like bare exposed wires or extension cords being used in an improper manner. Those are some of the things that we look for, and they're on that checklist there. We look for if there's bedrooms that they meet the minimum room size. It's really small. It's actually 70 square feet. The smallest dimension can only be 7 feet. That's the intent of that code requirement, is to keep people from making bedrooms out of little closets. So there is a habitable space concern there. And again, very life safety oriented, but yet important. It's a simple process, but it's a really complicated thing to pull off successfully, because people can get pretty sensitive about having people in their home, and the property owners can get sensitive about items they may or may not have known about, and we're just trying to make them aware of it. So when the inspector gets done, he completes his report, including photos. The checklist, the report, and the pictures are all provided to the tenant and the owner and property manager. And then if corrections are required, they need to be corrected in a timely manner. And of course, that varies on a case-by-case basis. The timeline could be from immediate, if it's like a smoke CO detector or a furnace that's improperly vented that could be putting carbon monoxide into the dwelling, versus up to several weeks if it's a maintenance item or something that just needs to be kind of remodeled. And so all this to say that at the end of it, the follow-up inspection is performed. We put a note in the file indicating its completion. And again, complete transparency for all the information to all the parties. Again, the goal is compliance, is to get these repairs done. And so in summary, it is a successful program. It yields results. It's not a program to get tenants out of their lease if they find a better place to rent. But if they have genuine life safety concerns, this is a free inspection, and it oftentimes is the catalyst to get the needed repairs done. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Guido.
Thank you, Jeremy, for that presentation. It's very informative, and I have a couple of questions. I think it's great that we have this program, and getting that word out to people is always the challenge, but it sounds like people are finding it. You mentioned the idea that the owner is invited to the inspection along with the tenant. How many take you up on that?
Not so much the owner, but the property manager they've employed usually take us up on that.
Okay.
A lot of times we've found that communication is an art that's not used in the manner it used to be. So we are a lot of times the person that brings those two parties together. The landlord may not even know about it. They may have received an abstract email one time, and the tenant thought that was communicating the request to the property management company. And so we get good results from people that want to be there, because we're finding that as soon as they're involved, that they want to do the right thing as well.
Interesting, yeah. And then my other question is, are you keeping a record of like success or compliance rates? You know, how many people are complying and you've successfully closed the loop? Do you guys report on that?
We keep records of everything that we've done with dwelling safety inspections, all back to the paper days. They're in folders and files, to the electronic days. And we do get results. We specify when we send the letter out if it's a maintenance item or an actual building code or life safety requirement. So the maintenance items themselves, we don't follow up on, because the code isn't designed to follow up on a maintenance type item. But anything that's a life safety concern that's addressed in the building code or on that checklist of, bare wires, smoke detectors, we do get compliance on that. That's the intent of it.
Okay.
So we tend to resolve them all. Some things take longer than others, but that's our goal, is to resolve them.
Yeah, I just thought a metrics, would be interesting to see, kind of the history of that success rate. Sounds like it's pretty positive.
Very, very positive, yeah. We tend to have a way to motivate people to do the right thing and get the life safety things done. Yeah.
Councilmember Weller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeremy, I really appreciate this. I think it's so very important, and it's not only the students. When I worked at SEL, there were a group of guys who were facing flood in their basement. Nobody, the property manager wasn't dealing with it, and they were scared because retribution, if they reported something, oh, what could happen? And I think that is something that, I'm not saying here at this time, but kind of looking into, because a lot of the students that come in, first-time renters, and I know you were talking about students jumping from one apartment to another because they find something better. I have found more often than not predatory landlords. And I've faced it myself. I've used this. I'm probably in one of the paper copies myself. I did the walkthrough, and the landlord that I was with was very reticent, did not want to do these things. But because it was the city, there was some amount of force that was, you need to deal with this. You can't have electrical in front of water. You can't have plywood as your, porch. So I think, while I appreciate you mentioning this is as much about the rights and responsibilities of the renters as it is holding accountable a certain percentage of landlords who have taken advantage of first-time renters or those who are not, very knowledgeable. So I really, really appreciate that we have this, and I hope more people can use it and realize that if there is retribution, there are laws to deal with that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I believe your story turned out to be one that got closed out and completed, I think, if I recall correctly. So, but thank you.
Councilmember Wright?
Thank you, Jeremy, for your presentation. It's very informative. My question is just how many of these inspections do we get on an annual basis, and how many end up being completed?
Any year to year, they vary. We used to get probably more like 15 to 20 a year. The last couple years have been more like 10 to 15, probably. We get resolution on most of them. I shouldn't say all of them, but it feels like that. But we do get resolution, especially on the life safety items. And then we see a tendency of frequency when the move-in time is. So we'll go months without any, maybe, and then that end of August, first week of September, we'll get a few or more, and then again in December, first week of January, we'll get a few, and it's a chance for us to hold property owners accountable, but also let the tenants know, that they have this service out there, and the transparency again is the important part. So the owners and the landlords know, hey, this person has these concerns. I've even in the recent past spoken at the Whitman County Landlord Associations at their luncheons, done a similar presentation to explain to them, hey, when you hear from this is what it's about. We're not out there to get anybody. We're out there to make it safe and get compliance. And I think it's really improved the communication throughout the city, taking the time to convey that to the realtors and the landlords as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I think just last comment, I think given the number of inspections that you have said occur, and then given the number of rental properties that we have in Pullman, that rate is really pretty low in terms of reports coming forward.
I'd agree with that, yeah. We try and deal with, we get a lot of inquiries when I said that the staff vet the inquiry to see if it's the right program for them, if the tenant is open to it. We can solve a lot of these with just a good conversation with the landlord and meet them on site and get them in contact and say, here's your property manager, here's your tenant, you're having a miscommunication. And when it's pretty low key, we get good success without all the official side of things. So we do try to help as much as we can. When I said that 10 to 15 or 15 to 20 is when it's all official and documented, but it's very much a public service that we provide. So if we can take care of it more casually and less strict, if you will, we do if the property owner is available or the manager and the tenant's open to speaking with them. Yeah.
Good, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Delera?
Yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. This one question, I have a second question, is just to highlight protections. So if a tenant is worried about retaliation from their landlord for submitting a dwelling unit inspection form, what protections do tenants have?
So when I get that concern, what I do is I refer them to the Washington landlord-tenant law, and I would encourage them to read that. I try very carefully not to provide legal advice. The legal aspects of code administration from my position, I have to say, we're here for the life safety dwelling inspection. If you have concerns, contact this. You know, you legally have rights, and make that information available to them, either the student legal services or the landlord-tenant law. Yeah.
And then I guess the second question, thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Does the dwelling inspection program cover concerns around common area safety in apartment complexes like stair, handrails, floor platforms that are outside of the unit?
Yes, yeah, the common areas are included. You know, that's part of their what you would call means of egress or discharge to the public way, things of that nature. And yeah, we would address concerns that were life safety oriented with that, guardrails, handrails, things of that nature. There can be hanging down lights and loose wires, things of that nature. But yeah, it would include common areas as well. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Parks?
Thank you. Thank you for the report and for the reminder about this service that we do offer. My question is, do we put anything, do we put information out into the community about this? For example, give information to property managers or put it in offices of the apartment, the rental offices, things like that?
To answer your question, we don't do a lot of proactive advertisement of this. Word of mouth. I think I mentioned I spoke at the landlord, the Whitman County Landlord Association.
Yeah.
So the landlords are aware of it, and then the student services are normally aware of it, and then very much word of mouth. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe try to get that available on our website, maybe under a how do I type thing, so it's not 2 or 3 clicks deep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you. This is a very timely report, and it's good information. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Very good, thanks.
Next up, we have financial update for Q2 of 2024 with our Director of Finance and Administrative Services, Jeff Albrecht.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. What I'm going to do is go through Q2 financial report, and then I'll answer any questions, and then I have a little educational piece to follow that up with. So what we're going to cover tonight is the financials for the first half of the year. So this is through June 30th. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about some of the trends and some of the things we're seeing. Overall, things are pretty stable and positive, but I'll note a few things as we go through. So you probably gotten used to these. We spend a good majority of our time on the general fund. That's usually the one that kind of has the most impact, and honestly is usually one of the tightest funds as far as financials. So here you can see general fund revenue. You can see the 5-year trend. We were kind of flat coming out of COVID, had a nice little kind of increase, and now we're leveling off again. The good news is we're still performing better in the budget. 2023 was very positive to budget. 2024 is still positive budget, but we're seeing those revenues kind of level off in almost all our categories. So you can see we're almost T million ahead of budget, which is great. But definitely are starting to see that trend of revenues leveling off, and that's something to keep an eye on. This is property tax collection. This slide's always probably, out of all the sources, this is our most consistent source. We have very little variance. It just slowly kind of ticks up in most years. Really, it's our collection rates are strong. They're where we think they should be. And just a reminder that I always put up there is we don't collect on university buildings, government buildings, and churches. And that's obviously common across the state, but I always mention it here because Pullman has a very large proportionate of those compared to most cities. So that's always something to keep in mind. The other thing is any past taxes that aren't paid, that stays with the property. So some point we will get that. Usually what happens is if somebody doesn't pay their back taxes, they go to sell the property and they have to settle that up. So that comes out of the sale. So sooner or later we will get that money. So like I said, it's a really consistent source. And that even that non-payment has stayed pretty consistent. It hasn't really changed much. Sales tax revenue, which is one of our larger revenue sources behind property tax, but also has a lot more variability, though, than property tax. And so you can see here, we got the big dip, jumped back really nicely last year, but again, you're seeing that level off. So you can see through 6 months, we're pretty much the same as we were last year. And the good news is it's a good number, it's a high number. The bad news is if that doesn't increase, that really limits some of our things that we can do expenditure-wise. So well ahead of budget, through 6 months, 3 are above what they were last year, 3 are below what they were last year. So it's even within the months, it can kind of really vary a little bit. But again, another trend that we're going to want to keep an eye on to see if that continues to level off or if it bounces back up or dips a little bit farther down. These are just some other general fund revenues. Again, the majority of our revenues are those sales tax and property tax, but I do want a few others. We have a number of other taxes, the biggest chunk of that being utilities tax. You can see that's pretty consistent, the slight increases. Admissions tax has a lot more variability. And this is taxes on various events, a large number of them being WCU. So WCU Athletics, as you can imagine, makes up the largest portion of this tax revenue. Timing can play a lot into it. So one thing that you have to remember is it's not the timing of the event, it's the timing of when the ticket's sold for that event, and it's filed quarterly. So I'll give you an example. If WCU puts season tickets on sale for football, and they sell a bunch in March, they file that at the end of March, and we would receive it in April. But if they, say, get a lot of ticket revenue in August, we'd actually receive that in October. So there's a lot of timing variances in addition to just the variability of those events and what happens. So sometimes the year-to-year comparisons are a little hard to do throughout the year. Licensing and permit revenue is bounced around a little bit. The building permits for the second year in a row are looking to be down a little bit from where they were. Now, 2022, we may have had a little bit of a backlog coming out of COVID, which might have caused 21 and 22 to be a little bit higher. But because building obviously then often translates into future tax, it's really something to keep in mind. Intergovernmental revenues, those have been pretty consistent. Those include grants, revenue from other governments. The marijuana and liquor tax is one that I typically put on there. It's been really, really consistent over the last 5 years. It might be the one industry that I suppose was probably isolated from COVID out of anything. So that's something to keep in mind, but that's been really consistent numbers. And then we have general government fees, fines, and penalties, and then general government revenues, again, fairly consistent there, and then miscellaneous revenues, which you've seen an increase. The biggest reason that increase has been driven by a couple things. The opioid settlement money that we've started to receive in, that's actually been a big contributor to that. And then we have had some decent return on interest on our cash on hand, which has been helpful too. And there's a few other things that play into that, but those two have been two of the primary things that have helped drive that up. So here you look at general fund expenses. That's a really straight line, not surprising. So it just kind of creeps up as really the cost of doing business creeps up. So it's good that we haven't seen major fluctuations in that. The COVID ones, when we get to Q3, you'll probably see a little bit more COVID impacts from 2020 and 21, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent. We're about $1 million under budget, which is good. There's some timing factors that sometimes play into that. Capital expenses, for example, Some it's just the timing on the capital expenses, so that probably makes up about a little over $200,000 of that $1 million savings, but it is good that we're under budget as far as the revenues go. One thing I will say is, you heard me mention we're ahead of revenue targets, and we're better than expense. But actually, if you look at our revenues to expenses through the end of June, it's almost even. We're almost at a $0 amount. So we had budgeted to use potentially some reserves to cover some things when the budget was developed a couple of years ago. So while our revenues are better than budgeted and our expenses are better than budgeted, our actual net is about zero. So just kind of keep that in mind. I put this on there just to kind of show you the fluctuation in capital, because that can really affect some timing things. A lot of capital stuff was put on hold about mid-year of 2020 and through 21 and 22. This isn't bad necessarily that we're seeing capital, because we need to make sure we're investing in some of these things and replacing equipment and investing in facilities. But it can change the year-to-date budget numbers. So I just wanted to put that on there so we know. And really what we're seeing is our capital expenses are returning back to normal. It's not that we've seen a huge increase. It's just that's really what they were pre-COVID. So we'll break down some expenses in various departments within the general fund. Here's the legislative. We are slightly over budget at this point. A lot of that, actually really all of it over budget for that slide is voter and election fees were higher than we had budgeted for. So there's a decent chance we'll come back with a budget amendment at the end of the year once we see how everything's set up. If you take that out, it's almost dead on budget. Finance and administration, you can see the increase there. The biggest cause for the increase in 2023 and 2024 has been the implementation of our Tyler software products. We have various phases. We completed the finance phase late in 2023. We're currently in the middle of our permit and licensing and utility billing phases. And so that's a biggest reason for the increase. But you see 2 year-to-dates of budget, we still are under budget in the finance and administration area. Law enforcement, again, pretty consistent increasing. You've seen that level off a little bit there. To date, we're about $4.77 million, which is a little bit positive to budget. One thing I will kind of keep in mind here, and I know Mike's been having conversations with the county, is we do have a pretty significant county court costs that make up part of this budget, and that's something that they're currently evaluating what those costs are going to be in the future, and there's the potential for an increase, a fairly substantial increase potentially there. So that's something to keep in mind going forward. Fire and ambulance, again, very consistent. You kind of see this trend line up. Budget-wise, doing a little bit better than budgeted, which is kind of about where we expect. We expect most of the departments to be slightly better than budget at mid-year. That's pretty common, knowing that they can't exceed that budget. So everything's kind of really on track with fire and ambulance. Community and economic development, again, you're seeing very consistent trend lines across all these departments, so I don't want to belabor it, but you're seeing really it is these slight increases, really kind of just slightly better than budget. And really the 23 and 24 is a lot of that's caused by inflation, which is everything from goods and services to wages to those types of things that cause those increases. Library has a little steeper line, and a lot of that is coming out of COVID. They were one of the most impacted departments coming out of COVID. They're in recreation, but again, you see a slightly better performance to budget and a fairly consistent line going up. Parks and Recreation, the most impacted from COVID, so again, a little steeper trend line. One of the things that does occur at Parks and Recreation, a lot of their activities do have fees associated with it. So if their expenses are up, a lot of times that means that they're having higher participation in program. The fees don't cover the full cost of the program, but there is usually some revenue generation that comes along with that. So that is the one nice thing on the Parks and Rec. So it doesn't make up the whole increase in expenses, but some of that is covered through additional fee generation. They've also had some capital projects on the park side this year. You've probably seen out there that, and in 23 they did too, that really caused some of those increases. So streets and arterial streets, you see this big jump here. So this is the first quarter, quarter two, where we're seeing expenses related to the downtown project. So the downtown project falls all into this category. So that's why you see that big jump up there. We're right around $2 million of expenses that we had paid this year related to the downtown project. And so that's why you see a big jump. You see that we're significantly under budget in quarter two, and some of it is just timing on when those expenses are coming in related to downtown. Utilities fund, you saw this one's a lot of times very driven by projects also. So a lot of times when you see increases in this, it's based off of projects that cause about 1.25 million of that $1.4 million increase is project related. So that's why you see the big jump there. Is that there's obviously some inflation and other expenses increase, but a lot of it really is the projects that are going on. Here you see transit. Transit's significantly under budget. There is some expenses a little bit lower on repairs and maintenance. There's about $700,000 that got billed out in early July for repairs and maintenance. That usually gets billed out at the end of June. So that's about $700,000 of that $900,000 variance is that timing on that repairs and maintenance. So you'll probably see that level off when I do the next quarterly report. So that's it for the general fund. We'll move into some of our other funds, into our internal service funds, excuse me. So these are the funds that really they're generated from business that the city does within itself. So again, this is our ERD, equipment rental division, our buildings, our IT, and our GIS. And again, we have some swings here based off of projects. You can see 2023, we had that spike. That was probably some timing on some projects that happened in the first half of 2023. So, but overall, again, performing well to budget. And again, it's always good. These funds really have an impact across all of the other city budgets because all of the other cities are using these resources as well as paying for these resources. Civic improvement funds, so this is our hotel lodging tax, and I just have the revenues generated from the hotel lodging. Again, not surprising, you saw that massive dip coming out of COVID. Saw a really great jump in 22 and 23, but much like many of our other revenues, this one's now leveling out, which again is still strong, but it is leveling out and not seeing, we'll have to continue to watch if that trend continues to flatten, increase or decrease. So just a few final thoughts. Pretty much all of our revenue sources are leveling. They're still strong, but they're all leveling out. They're not increasing near at the rate they were last year, which isn't entirely surprising. Overall revenues and expenses are positive compared to budget. So in most cases, our revenues are exceeding what we budgeted. In most cases, our expenses are under what budgeted. But there is still some timing impacts. And again, in the general fund, that net is about zero. And then the capital investment, you're starting to see return to normal, which is great. So that's what I have for you as far as quarter two. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jeff. I have two questions here. So the first is, I appreciate how you're splitting off the different departments. Is there any way that we could also have a slide in the future of all the departments on one? I wouldn't mind a cornucopia of expenses on one slide.
Okay, so like a pie chart or something like that displays them all, kind of, is that what you're thinking of?
A pie chart and in Excel. I know there are different departments, different sizes departments, this sorts of stuff.
Okay.
I know this was done way back, but I wouldn't mind something like that along with the funds. But I do also know why it's being done this way.
Sure.
The other question is, and this was brought up during goal setting by Councilmember Fajarin, and I know in the past I had also had this question, pilot, so the payment in lieu of taxes. This is something that we've discussed for a little while, and if we've explored that, because we provide services to many of those buildings that are not taxed. And I know this has been done in many different university towns with great success. Previously, I know there was some concerns about, well, we don't want to ruffle feathers and so on and so forth, but there is a time where change is needed, expense increases, danger for whether that's fire or inspection increases and so on and so forth. We're taking on responsibilities and we're not being compensated for them properly. So that's something I would hope that we can start exploring at some time.
Yeah, and I'll touch a little bit on this in kind of the educational piece, and there is some cases where we are capturing some things, but I think that's something that's definitely worth to continue to look at and revisit.
Councilor Guido?
Thanks, Jeff, for the report. And I have a specific question. I don't know if you can answer or not, but it's more out of curiosity. So around the general fund revenues, one source is marijuana tax. How much of that tax do we get percentage-wise? And how much goes to the state?
So it's interesting. There's a few, and I'll talk again a little bit more about this. There's several taxes out there that technically we don't get a portion of the tax, but we get allocated money from the state based off of the revenues they receive from that. So it's kind of weird because it's not technically our tax. So like there's a portion of sales tax that is the city of Washington's tax. This is all the marijuana tax, for example, goes to the state, but they proportion some of that out to the city for various purposes. So it's it's not an actual percentage, if that makes sense. So the total dollar amounts, well, you saw it, when I think at liquor and marijuana combined, it's not a huge number. I'd have to double check. It's not a real large number though for the total dollar amount.
Do you know how they determine that?
I don't know the specific formula for it. So.
Just a comment, it's never been fair for the city. This has been something that we've lobbied our representatives about since they decided it, and it's never been fair compared to the amount of responsibility placed on our police. So,
yeah. The state sets it. We don't have say in it.
Yeah.
With that, I guess I don't see any other questions. So you want to continue on to your next presentation?
Sure. So if you remember, last month we kind of started I think it's last meeting, we started kind of this educational series around finances, and this is certainly for the boards or for the council's information, but certainly for the city too. It's just a way to kind of create some better understanding, especially as we're in the middle of budget season. So last time we talked about the funds specifically and kind of the fund breakdown. So what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight is kind of the revenues related to that fund and kind of where the revenues come from, what kind of rules exist around the revenues, those types of things. So we'll kind of build on what we last. So hopefully y'all paid attention last time and learned a lot because we'll kind of build on it tonight. So what we're going to talk about is revenue sources. Different funds allow for different sources of revenue. One of the things I think I learned when I was probably about 5 years old, and I went to the store and my mom gave me money and she said, you can't spend this on candy. That rule still kind of applies today. Anytime you get a revenue, there's usually some type of restriction, some type of string, some type of way you have to spend it. That's just kind of how it works. So I kind of talk about as we go through, there's pretty much some type of restriction or limitation on pretty much every revenue source we have. Really what the state does is they kind of create, in the borrowers, they kind of create categories for revenues. And so what the categories we'll talk about are taxes, licenses and permits, intergovernment revenues, that includes most of our grants, that includes some of the revenues that are given to us by the state, like the marijuana tax actually falls in here, not the taxes, because it's allocated, it's not our tax. Charges for goods and services, fines and penalties, miscellaneous, which is donations, those types of things. And then, of course, the other thing you can do to generate revenue is issue debt, so you can issue bonds. So we'll kind of talk through different funds and how those kind of relate to each fund. So what I have on each of these slides is based off of 2023 actuals, what percentage of our revenue came from that source. I will caveat this is just 2023. This can vary year to year, especially in some of the categories like grants and those types of things can change a fair amount year to year. So I will caveat this, but at least gives you an idea of kind of where the money comes from for those particular sources. So the first is our government funds, which remember from last time is our general fund. This is very heavily tax subsidized. We've talked about that, and obviously the primarily being the property and sales tax. So about 72% of the revenues generated there come from taxes. Licensing and permits is a piece, building permits being the biggest one of them, but it can be anything that we charge a permit to do or a license to do. This can be a dog license, this can be a parking permit, again, building permits, those types of things. Intergovernment revenues, again, are from another government. Grants do show up here. Shared tax revenues, so again, if the state collects revenue on some type of tax, sometimes they distribute that to the cities or the counties. That would fall in here. Services, so this is charges for services we provide. The biggest source in here is probably the recreational services that I mentioned when I was talking about recreation. Library, fines and penalties is very minimal. That includes things like library, parking fines, those types of things. So fines and penalties are not a large source of revenue. Probably don't want it to be. If it is, you probably need to address some other issues within the city, so that's good. And then again, miscellaneous, those are things like donations, interest revenue, the opioid funds that I mentioned earlier kind of fall into that miscellaneous. So that kind of gives you an idea in the government funds. Anytime you have a general fund for any city, taxes is going to be a majority of where the money comes from. That's really what's going to affect the general fund the most. Just to break that tax piece down a little bit farther, that 72%, 29% is property tax. So again, that's the biggest one. 23% is sales tax. So out of that 72%, you can see almost all of it lies there. Utility tax is the next big one. So that's taxes on utilities that the city offers. So water, sewer, stormwater, as well as privately owned offerings. So electricity, garbage, those phone. So those are all have some type of utility tax on them. And then the other taxes are criminal justice, gambling, leasehold, admissions, and those are a smaller chunk that makes that up. So there is a variety of taxes that do fall into that category. So next is our street funds. We do have some taxes from the utilities that support the street funds. So part of the utility tax is distributed to the street fund. They do have a little bit of licensing and permit, not a lot. Intergovernmental is the biggest thing here. And the intergovernmental basically has kind of two chunks of category. There's a motor vehicle fuel tax, again, that the state collects, and they allocate part of that. So that's about half of that 60%. And then roughly about another half is grants. So grants that we receive for street projects. So it's good. I like grant funding for projects because you don't have to worry about how to sustain it in case the grant money goes away. It pays for the project. Project's done, and that's great. So it's been good that we've been able to get grant money to support that. And there's a few charges for services and miscellaneous make up a little bit there. So as you can see, most of that is from intergovernment or that utility tax. Civic improvement, again, this is pretty much all generated through lodging tax. That's really where it is. There's a portion of the lodging tax that is submitted out of the sales tax, and then an additional portion on top of that, and that money's collected by the state and remitted back to us. One thing you'll find on a lot of these revenues, on these taxes, we actually very rarely do we actually collect the tax ourselves. Admissions is one of the few. In most cases, it's collected by the county or the state and then given to us. So one of the things when I do my monthly projections is almost always a delay in taxes because usually it's a time period and then it's submitted to the state or the county, and then it takes a little while for the county or state to get it to us. So there's always a little bit of delay on those revenues coming in. Then there's a proprietary funds. So a utility fund, for example. And again, proprietary funds, if you remember, they're really designed to kind of be self-sustaining. They're designed to operate and cover their own expenses for the most part. So we do have a little bit of intergovernmental, sometimes a few grants is really what we get here, but 95% of the revenue is generated from services. So again, that's the money that's charged to provide that service. So it's really, again, designed to kind of be self-sustaining. Our other proprietary fund is transit. This one's a little different, but still it's designed to be self-sustaining. So we do have utility tax money that goes to here that generates about 28% of the revenue. Intergovernmental is 37%. Our transit is done very well on grants in recent history, which is tremendous. They are primarily operating grants, so of course the downside is if that grant money goes away, you need to determine how to sustain your operations or how to adjust your operations to your new means. But with that said, we obviously want to maximize those grant funds. 34% of that revenue is from services, but I want to caveat that very little is actually generated through direct ridership. A lot of our services are contract services, so we have contracts with WSU, we've had contracts with Pullman School District in the past. I think we even got a small one at Spokane Falls Community College. So a lot of that service is actually generated through contracts for services, not necessarily what the person's paying, individual person's paying for a bus pass, for example. And then there's miscellaneous income. The bottom line is for our community, we have a very heavily subsidized transit system, which is great. I mean, it allows them to take advantage of that because it's highly subsidized by grants and taxes and those types of things. So then we have our internal service funds. So again, this is our equipment rental, buildings, IT, and GIS. So again, all the revenue is generated for the services they provide. And the thing about this is basically the city is the one who's paying for those services. So if the revenue goes up here, our expenses are also going up at the same time as a city. So it's kind of overall for the city, it's a financial neutral, but it's what's used to cover those expenses that IT provides or our building services provides to the entire city. So. And then we have our fiduciary funds, which right now is Metro Parks. And basically a fiduciary fund, if you remember, it's a separate entity, but we kind of manage the money for them. So right now it's Metro Parks. A benefit transit district would be another example of a fiduciary fund. And really what those are is they're a separate entity, but they exist really to support the city. And usually it's pretty much almost all tax revenue. So what will happen in the case of the Metro Parks, tax revenue is generated, then basically Metro Parks more or less transfers that money to the city in return the city provides a Metro Park service, which in our case is usually some type of park project or development or those types of things. So it really allows, the fiduciary funds really allow the city to offer some services that might be otherwise hard to fund. So just a few things in general. About 80% of the city's revenue comes from taxes or services. So out of that 80%, about half of it is taxes in some way, shape, or form, and about half of it is some type of charges for services. Now, caveat that charges for services, that does include the internal service funds. So that's, again, if you remember, that's kind of an in or out. So out of that, about a fifth of it is kind of internal to the city. But a lot of the other services, really, it's really through that utility and some of our transit services. Grants are an important source of revenue. We need to continue to maximize those as much as possible, but they can really create some high variability in revenues, and that's something to always keep in mind, especially if they're operating related grants. Again, not saying don't go after them, but that's always something that you have to worry a little bit about sustainability or keep in mind. Again, almost all revenue has some type of restriction or expectation. Property taxes, we're capped by a 1% increase per year. Any type of granting agency is always going to give you very specific rules about how you can use a grant, and you have to follow those. If somebody's paying for a service, you obviously have to use that money to provide that service. So every revenue has some type of restriction on it, and that's always something to keep in mind. And I think sometimes people in the community don't understand hey, you generated this revenue, why don't you use it for this? Well, we're not allowed to. So that's just something to keep in mind. But with that said, there is some things that kind of cross over different funds. And I mentioned the utility tax. If you hear me, I mentioned that in a couple of those. So we have a utility tax. Part of that goes to support the general fund. Part of it goes to support the street funds. Part of it goes to support transit. So there is some crossover in some of these things. And some of these restrictions that I mentioned are determined by you as the council. So like that, for example, the council determined how those were going to be distributed by an ordinance in the past. Most of them are dictated by state law or something along those lines, but there is some internal restrictions. And the other thing is capital funding. When we do capital projects, a lot of times we'll use multiple revenue sources to support a capital project. So we might get a grant that covers part of it. We might use one fund because it has a utility component to it, and we might use some money from the metro parks because it's for a park improvement. So it does give you, while I say there's a lot of strings, there is some flexibility in how you approach funding some of these projects from the revenue. But of course, it all has to be justifiable to an auditor and to the community. So that's kind of my little revenue topic, and I'll certainly answer any questions.
With that, any questions? Looks like everybody's very happy with. So thank you. Jeff, I appreciate you doing these because it helps to inform and not only the council but then also the public too, and it creates this transparency of how things work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is consent agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by a single motion of the City Council without separate discussion. With that, I'll entertain a motion to read the consent agenda by title only.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
With that, if you could read the.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the July 23, 2024 regular meeting minutes and approve them as submitted. Item 2 is a motion to dispense with the reading of the July 30, 2024 regular meeting minutes and approve them as submitted. Item 3, a motion to accept the Terraview Roundabout at North Fairway contract as complete. Item 4, a motion to ratify change order number 2 to the City of Pullman WWTP WAS Thickening Improvements Project contract. Item 5, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks number 2011-2087 through 2011-2130, totaling $434,889.65. Item 6, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks number 2011-2131 through 2011-2146, totaling $295,669.92. Item 7, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks number 2011-2147 through 2011-2207, totaling $524,472.93. Item 8, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks, electronic transfers, and ADP payroll. Transfers totaling $1,135,254.72. Item 9 is resolution number R-51-24, a resolution accepting the bid of Knox Concrete LLC for the Sidewalks 2024 project and authorizing execution and delivery of the contract for said project. And finally, item 10, resolution number R-52-24, a resolution authorizing the execution of amendment number 3 to a water quality combined financial assistance agreement between the City of Pullman and the Washington State Department of Ecology for the decant facility project.
With that, do any council members desire have any items removed from the consent agenda to be discussed separately? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. With that, we're now on to the regular agenda. And the first one with that, oh, Kara stepped up. So with that, I'd let you go to the first one for agreement with. This is PBAC.
Yes, all right. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. If adopted tonight, the resolution before you will authorize execution of a new interstate agreement for the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, referred to as PBAC. PBAC is a voluntary, cooperative, multi-jurisdictional group comprised of representatives from the cities of Pullman and Moscow, Whitman and Latah counties, and WSU and U of I. PBAC has existed in some form since 1967 with a mission to ensure a long-term quality water supply for the Palouse Basin region. In late June, Councilmember Weller provided an excellent update and presentation to you regarding PBAC. That effort provided additional context on the function and operations of PBAC and helped set the stage nicely for the action before you this evening. This new proposed agreement will essentially replace the original 20-year agreement that has been in place since 2003. That original agreement expired on August 21st, 2023, but was extended by an additional year by a memorandum of agreement that was authorized by Pullman City Council last November. Overall, the new agreement incorporates fairly minor changes in comparison to the original agreement, which are aimed primarily at modernizing the language and providing increased clarity. Of particular note regarding changes, the new agreement now stipulates a shorter term at 10 years. In addition, modifications to the funding contributions have been made. The new agreement increases total annual contribution levels from $47,000 presently to $53,750 for major pumpers, which includes Pullman. Other entities, namely the counties at this time, would increase their annual contribution from $7,650 to $8,483 per year. The last time funding levels changed was in 2019, and before that in 2007. Pullman's funding for PBAC comes from the water budget of the utility fund, with sufficient funds already earmarked in the 2024 budget to support this new proposed amount. Staff recommends that Council adopt proposed resolution R-53-24, which will authorize execution of the new interstate agreement and allow PBAC to continue its important ongoing regional work. I'd be happy to take any questions.
With that, any questions for Kara? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve resolution number R-53-24.
Second.
Second. With that, if you could read the motion.
Resolution number R-53-24, a resolution authorizing the execution of a new interstate agreement between the City of Pullman, the City of Moscow, Washington State University, the University of Idaho, Whitman County, and Latah County for the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee. Sorry, aquifer, not fire.
With that, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next up, we have Clayton Forsman. Our next two resolutions. First one, Resolution 5424.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. In 2022, the city received a federal safety grant to fund the design and construction of improvements to 4 pedestrian crosswalks in Pullman. The 4 locations were identified in our 2022 Local Road Safety Plan. Those locations are listed in your council packet, and for the benefit of the public, I'll mention them again here. They are the intersections of Center and Fountain Street, South Grand and McKenzie/Blaine, Old Hawaii Road and Marcia, and the last location is Stadium Way and Liebecker. The improvements include the addition of flashing beacons, push buttons, curb ramp upgrades, and new crosswalk striping. To select a consultant for this work, staff solicited statements of qualifications from qualified firms. 5 proposals were received. Those were evaluated, and the top 3 were selected for telephone interviews. This ultimately led to the selection of Kittleson and Associates as the most qualified consulting firm for the project. The full scope of work is included in your packet, and all work will be performed on a cost reimbursable basis with a not to exceed amount of $95,709. And the safety grant will fund 100% of these costs. It is staff's recommendation that council adopt the attached resolution approving a professional services agreement with Kittleson and Associates for the pedestrian crossing improvements project.
With that, any questions? Councilmember Weller.
Less of a question, more of a comment. I'm really glad to see the Liebecker Stadium Way intersection, because we have a lot of kids coming from the community center there. Cross there all the time myself and students as well, so it's a very high trafficked area, very difficult for people to see often. So thank you.
You bet.
Councilmember Parks.
Thank you. I just wanted to also say that happy to see Southwest Fountain and Center Street. I've had some parents in the last few months ask me about that, both for vehicular visibility, but also for pedestrians. So I appreciate I appreciate all of this, actually, that we're kind of improving our crosswalks little by little. So thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, and I definitely have firsthand knowledge of that intersection. Any other questions? If not, I entertain a motion for this resolution.
Move to adopt.
Second.
With that, if you could read the resolution, please.
Resolution number R-54-24, a resolution authorizing the execution of local agency A&E professional services cost plus fixed fee consultant agreement between the City of Pullman and Kittleson and Associates, Inc. for the citywide pedestrian crossing improvements project.
Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And next resolution.
Thank you. Yep. For the next one, so we have a second project from 2022 that was also funded with safety money, federal grant. This project is to improve 9 traffic signals in the city. It was also developed from that same local road safety plan from 2022. Those signals that will be upgraded include Grand and Bishop, Grand and Crestview, Grand and Whitman, Grand and Stadium Way, Grand and Terraview, Stadium and Valley, Main and Stadium Way, Main and Bishop, Main and Terraview. And the improvements include the addition of flashing left yellow arrows, new signal heads with reflectorized backplates, internally illuminated street name signs, and new signal controllers and cabinets, as well as leading pedestrian intervals where appropriate. To select a consultant for the work, again, staff solicited statements of qualifications through the same process I just explained, and ultimately Kittleson and Associates was selected for this project as well. The full scope of work is included in your packet. And again, all work will be performed on a cost reimbursable basis with a not to exceed amount of just over $140,000. And again, the grant will fund 100% of these costs. Therefore, it is staff's recommendation that council adopt the resolution before you, approving a professional services agreement with Kittleson and Associates for the intersection improvements project. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions? Sorry. Councilmember Weller.
I know I've spoken a lot tonight, so nothing new. I did have a question about, does this include the noises of, for people to cross who,
Yes, it includes accessible push buttons.
Okay, and the other question that I had related to that was, we've had some questions, some concerns from, like for instance, downtown. I know there's several business owners where the noise from those are so loud that it kind of goes through their building. How do we determine the level? Is it already preset?
Sure, we can adjust the levels. There is a minimum level that we have to meet.
Gotcha.
Per the MUTCD.
Okay,
Yep.
just a point of clarification. Thank you.
You bet.
And that minimum level is based on what the noise is, so it's a minimum level above. So if traffic noise goes up, then the minimum level goes up.
Right, it's above the ambient level.
Any other discussion? If not, entertain a motion for passing this resolution.
Move to adopt.
Second.
That, if you could read the resolution, please.
Thank you. Resolution number R-55-24, a resolution authorizing the execution of local agency A&E professional services cost plus fixed fee consultant agreement between the City of Pullman and Kittleson and Associates, Inc. for the citywide intersection improvement project.
With that, any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you very much.
Thank
Next item up is a discussion item. This is continuing with our work group selection. This one's on the in-town rail banking, where the council members Weller, Parks, and Fajarin have been assigned, and I believe you have a meeting coming up soon on this, of which, you know, I've asked staff if they can provide an update for you just on where we're at related to the rail banking process. There's many of you are very familiar with the process as it relates to the legislative action that has to happen first. But as a part of that is, you know, what's the strategy related to approaching the legislature on this, along with what are imagining what are the things that we can do with the land and the space and repurposing that space. And this is with that, just wanted to see if there's any questions related to this goal. I know we've talked through these goals a lot as we were developing them, but just seeing if there's any questions related to this as we move forward. Councilmember Weller?
Is this going to also need action by our legislators?
The land is state-owned land, so the legislature would need to direct DOT in order for this process. So yes, it requires legislative action.
Thank you.
Of which, at our next council meeting is when we will we'll start talking about what is our legislative priorities. And so that now that as these time out, then we're now into this planning for the legislative priorities and planning for our legislative meeting with our legislators that we're working to get scheduled this fall. Okay, so concluding that, is there any new business before us? No? So next we have executive session that we'll be entering in. And so at this time, City Council will adjourn to executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-10-1B to consider the selection of a site or acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood of increased price. The executive session expected to last approximately 10 minutes. If it becomes necessary to extend the executive session, someone will return to announce the anticipated additional time needed by City Council. The Council does not anticipate taking action following the executive session. It's 8:53. We'll start at 8:55 for the executive session. With that, thank you.
City Council is extending the executive session for 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
It's 9:10. We're bringing council back together, and with that, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning? Aye. We are adjourned.